All right, the Ryder Cup we've all been waiting for is finally upon us, and the chirping is heating up quickly, with Bryson DeChambeau firing the first shots and Rory McIlroy quickly responding with some words of his own, which might even have implications beyond the Ryder Cup, possibly even a dig at Liv, stirring up what was a kind of a quieter rivalry is getting hotter once again. But on top of that, you've got Rory McIlroy predicting that there may just be another big dust-up like we saw in Rome. And then adding fuel to all of that fire are some comments recently from the captain on the European side, Luke Donald, who's pointing out that now with the changes into payments with players on the U.S. team getting paid more than ever before, could possibly backfire if the New York crowd gets a hold of this and the American team is not playing up to their capacity. So there is a lot to go over. We got a lot of quotes to dig into, but all of the action of the Ryder Cup is finally here and it is upon us. So I want to get into that. First, though, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist. And guys, eliminating gaps in iron performance is key to shooting lower scores. And the new Titleist T-Series irons are designed to help all golfers hit it higher, further, and closer. So whether you prefer tour precision, maximum speed, and forgiveness, or something in between, Titleist T-Series provides irons suited for every level of golfer, all with that signature Titleist quality and feel. And there's everything you love about the Titleist irons with added performance in this new lineup. It's a new seamless design that's absolutely stunning across all models. I absolutely love the look. I play a blended set myself, and you've got that clean, modern look, even in the 250s, the 350s. So to find out more about the T-Series irons that fit your game, what I've said to you guys before is definitely check out Titleist's website, Titleist.com. It's the best spot to go in there and book your fitting. A lot of you guys have asked how to get fit like we do in our videos and who to go see. Well, that is your starting point. Go to Titleist.com, book a fitting, do yourself a favor. You will definitely find something that fits you well in this new incredible T-Series lineup. So, Mike, obviously, the media is hot on this. They're ready to go and looking for where that controversy is going to be. The Ryder Cup brings that out. We've now seen multiple Ryder Cups that have gotten quite hot, but where we really reached a boiling point, if you remember, in Italy just 2 years ago with Rory McIlroy afterwards being restrained. You had Lowry jumping in there to kind of stop that. And you had the controversy, the Hatgate. Joe LaCava was involved. You guys know it really was what seemingly was a smaller issue was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back and was what really led to the emotions boiling over into some physicality there. And although it may seem like a minor detail, the slight increase that we've seen now in pay on the U.S. side could once again turn into that little straw that breaks the camel's back and creates some of the heated exchanges we may just see. So whereas hats was it 1 year, pay may be this year. But regardless, we've got some quotes to get into because they're going back and forth.
Yeah, and I love it. I think it's a big part of what the Ryder Cup is all about. These guys have been together as teammates now for the last 2 weeks. A lot of them playing on the same circuits together. Just recently, the guys all came into town. I saw some of the European guys were at Friars Head playing yesterday. So these guys are buddying, real fraternity-like style right now. So you know the jarring within is happening. They're probably talking trash about other guys versus this, and that's happening. I think you need it. I think it's great for this whole event. I think it's fantastic for social media. We're going to see it all out there, and it's the storylines that we need going into a Ryder Cup. We're going to see how it plays out and see if any other type of Hatgate or any type of, you never know. We're at Bethpage. We're in New York.
Right.
You never know what you're going to see out there.
But I tell you what, you guys in the comments, drop your early predictions and talk about what your own opinion is on which of these teams, like where are they at when it comes to gelling as a team? Because as you said, the European side, like this is a team who is very similar to what we saw 2 years ago with the only one difference, one player, swapped out on the team. And you said, you see in these pictures, they're gelling. Similarly, though, Keegan's doing everything to get his team in that same spot, bring them all out to the Fortinet and getting them to, living together, playing together. We talked about that in the last episode. So I think that these guys, as you said, they are gelling together. And I think that only potentially adds even more of like this, us versus them type of thing. But let's kind of get back into like who exactly said what and when it was said. So Bryson, he's not one to ever withhold his opinion. And Bryson kind of was the first one to start this ball rolling. And this actually goes back a little bit. The media has been running with it in recent days as we get closer to the Ryder Cup. But this is back in an interview with People magazine. And he interestingly called out Rory by name. He's going right specifically after Rory. We'll talk about that history of why he may have done that in a second. But the quote from Bryson was, "I'll be chirping in McIlroy's ear this time. Now, if we go up against each other, you can be sure of it." So interesting that it shows a strategy tactic.
Yeah.
And not every player is going to have the same strategy. Some guys you could see, like a Cantlay, are going to be very quiet. They're not going to necessarily be chirping, but they'll let their play speak for them. Bryson is a talker, and he's already saying part of his strategy is going to be to chirp these guys. And there's a huge aspect of a mental component that comes in of trying to take these guys out of their game.
Totally.
So I think Bryson's got to be thinking, we got home field advantage.
Mm-hmm.
The fans are going to be, letting him have it. I'm going to be letting him have it. And I'm going to see if I can take him out of his game.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes for fantastic, watch for us.
It does.
But at least, he's not being shy about it. He's laying it on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that's worth pointing out, again, because you're wondering why call out McIlroy specifically. Now, one could say he's kind of the face of the team.
He's the guy I think you got to get to.
He's the guy.
You got to get to him.
But on the same token, this goes back into April when the two were paired together at the Masters. And Bryson made it a point afterwards to point out the fact, and he said this about McIlroy. He said, "He didn't talk to me once all day. He wouldn't talk to me." So, and if you remember, like, that's the quote, but if the body language, the vibe, if you ever saw that interview, was almost like he was a little bit annoyed with McIlroy, that he almost gave him the cold shoulder. Rory was asked, to respond to that, and he said, "Yeah, like I was focused on myself and what I needed to do. That's really all it was. It wasn't anything against him or against. I just felt like that's what I needed to do to try and get the best out of myself that day."
Yeah.
So
Valid.
It is. But if you dig even deeper, don't forget this came on the heels of just the prior year, Bryson beating McIlroy on Sunday at Pinehurst #2 for the U.S. Open.
Yep.
And there was that, you could say, a little bit of a bad PR moment for Rory, where he walked out of there and didn't congratulate Bryson. He didn't do any press after that. He just got out of there with frustration, versus the optics of Bryson, who stuck around. He won it, but then Bryson, even, when he lost, behind, McIlroy and others, he kind of demonstrated that he was still willing to stick around and do the interviews and stuff like that.
Right.
So I think Bryson is trying to paint this picture that, like, hey, I'm the guy who's gonna try to talk to him. I'm whatever. And he's giving me the cold shoulder. So you're getting a little bit of this back and forth.
Yeah, I love it. And I even think in between all that, there was a moment, I think, where Rory and Bryson and a bunch of other players were at some type of clinic. This clip went viral on social media where, like, Rory's like, "Oh, I hope I don't lose it to Bryce," or something. And Bryce was like, "Oh, it won't be the first time." And everyone laughed.
Yeah.
So he knocked him again for the Pinehurst collapse. So who knows if there's bad blood or if it's just kind of fake, fueled, fun, kind of, but we're going to see, I think, but like I said before, I think it's going to be hot in Bethpage. And I honestly feel that I think Rory might have a chip on his shoulder with Liv still, and Bryson in particular.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Rory hates Bryson. I don't know that. But I feel like
yeah. And look, this recent quote where he responded, I think that he did make it a slightly bigger than the Ryder Cup. And Rory, for as much as he's softened on Liv, and even from the Ryder Cup standpoint, where he would put the pressure on, the people making the rules of who's allowed to play, of wanting to get, Rahm on the team. He really softened on Liv a lot in his rhetoric when Rahm went to Liv, and he started to say, like, I can't imagine a team without John, and he started to really take less of a hard line. Right. But I do agree there's still some chip there, and kind of in this response. So this is where Rory responded directly to Bryson saying that he was going to chirp him. He said, "I think the only way he gets attention is by mentioning other people. That is basically what I think of that. To get attention, he will mention me or Scotty Scheffler or others. So here's where, I get what he's trying to say. He's trying to take like the higher road, saying like he needs to say these things to get attention instead of just responding, be like, hey, I'll be chirping him right back, which he could have said. He took a bigger, more personal dig there because Bryson, you guys tell me if you agree with this in the comments or not, but I think Bryson, by saying I'll be chirping him, being in his ear, was a little bit more of saying like, that's competition, that's sport, that's my strategy. Rory go a little more on the personal attack and be like, that's the only way he can get attention.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting is specifically the one name he called out in that quote was Scotty Scheffler, who is one of Bryson's own teammates. So he didn't, it's not like he was saying like, the European team, we're all going to be hearing it or whatever it may be. And it just makes me wonder, is that a dig at LIV in general, saying like you're getting less attention since you left
100%
the PGA Tour?
I think so. I think because he mentioned a guy that's on his team, but not in his league, right? Yeah. He's over at the PGA Tour. I think so. In that response makes me feel like Rory still sees this big divide and you're not one of us feel.
Yeah. So. And it certainly promotes more of that rhetoric. Mm-hmm. Now, Rory in that same interview went on to say, and he's being asked like, do we think we're going to see something similar to what we saw in Rome? And, his quote, I think, is telling. He said, I think it's inevitable that something is going to happen in New York. It might not involve me, but it is inevitable that something will happen, whether like in Rome last time or something else. I just think when you go into that environment and you have there 4, 5, or 6 days and the crowd are on you for 8 hours, so many days in a row, it's inevitable that you will get to someone or get to us as a group at some point. We are just going to have to do a really good job of managing that, having each other's backs, and protecting each other. So he's basically saying, listen, we're going to be under such pressure the entire time. Somebody's going to snap. Yep. Now, that could be something as simple as somebody snaps at a fan and kicks somebody out of there for chirping them too much. Or it could be something as big as what we saw in Rome, where they start to go after each other, whether that be on the field or after the field. But when you have a Ryder Cup that matters so much, and you have such a pressure cooker situation, it's just inevitable that something's going to happen. And when I say matters so much, Rory himself has said that after what he's accomplished this year, finally, winning the Grand Slam, all that type of stuff, he's saying like this is really the lesson. To win a Ryder Cup, an away game on the other team's soil would just put it over the top for him. It means a lot to him.
Yeah, it does. And going back to your there's going to be so much hostility. I mean, guys like Hatton, like imagine him with an irate New Yorker. Like there's a guy with a tough temper, how are they going to be able to deal with it? I know we're going to talk later in the show about if it's going to backfire for this American or this New York crowd, I should say, with these guys getting paid. But I just don't see how you can have a temper or a personality like Hatton. I'm throwing him under the bus because we know he's so vocal out there. We hear him on the hot mic. How you could be something like that and handle this pressure. I don't think they're going to handle it. I just think it's going to be really, really hard. I think New York's going to come down on them very hard.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the reality is, on the European side, you've got a lot of fiery tempers. You know what I mean? You think you've got guys who wear their emotion on their sleeve. Jon Rahm
too, yeah.
Hatton as well. But I think this is where the captains have done a good job, even with their captain's picks, of trying to balance that out. On both sides, I think you've got the guys who are going to speak up and then the guys who are going to try to quiet that down a little bit. So there's definitely a lot to be said. I want to take a quick break there. Let's do a word from our sponsor. Then let's come back, and I want to talk about this kind of thing that's lurking underneath the surface. This being that the first time, and you could say it was driven largely by Hatgate and the response to that the U.S. team is getting paid significantly more. We're going to break down what that means, how they're getting paid, and what that might mean in practicality with optics, and how Luke Donald thinks that this might cause the fans to turn on their own team, which would be a disaster for them when they want home field advantage. So let's do a quick word from our sponsor and we'll get back into that.
All right, guys, it may be Ryder Cup week, but it's also the first day of fall, believe it or not. And FootJoy, they got you covered for every season. So regardless of the weather, they've got you. And now that it's getting a little colder, it's my favorite time of year to play, but it could get a little chilly out there. We could be playing rounds in the 50s, 60s. So you got to look out for things like the Tempo series where it's a little warmer, or that Thermo series for, those really cold days. And then, of course, rain is so unpredicted this time of year. So you got to make sure that you're all stocked up on the Hydro series for that wet weather. And not to mention, you got to get all those gloves for this season, whether it's the rain gloves or what other kind of all-weather gloves, they've got you. Socks, belts, headwear, you name it. FootJoy is obsessed with golf just like you, and they've been doing this for over 100 years. So why trust your golf gear to anyone else? Trust your game with the latest from FootJoy. Learn more at footjoy.com.
All right, so we got to talk about these payments and what's changed. One thing I will say before, because I'm probably going to get called out in the comments of what happened to my hand. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, what's that?
So I'm going to give you guys a little pro tip. Don't touch black walnuts.
Oh, that's all.
This is
okay.
Yeah.
I thought you burnt it. I was like,
I know, right? My kids were playing with something they have found in the yard, and I peeled it open to see what it was, and it turns out it's a black walnut. And not only does it stain, but they said it'll stay for many weeks until the skin goes away. So no amount of washing is taking that off, and I know that literally is sticking out like a sore thumb. So I figured I'd call it out before you guys do in the comments. I know I'm eventually going to hear it. Let's, though, talk about these payments. So getting paid to a certain extent is nothing completely new. In the past, the U.S. team, and the U.S. team, remember this, their backing is the PGA of America, not the PGA Tour, right? So the PGA of America is who makes these calls. They had received payment before, but it was a donation to charity. So the players could pick their charity, and there was a couple $100,000 that would be donated on their behalf. Of course, enter, which could be an entire podcast in and of itself, and we've talked about this extensively, but enter the drama that was some players, whether they did it, would deny it maybe when they're called out on it, because I don't think any player wants the optics of saying they need to get paid. Nobody's really sticking their neck out that far,
right.
But some have insinuated that basically there's so much money being made off the Ryder Cup at this point, it's silly for them to not get something back out of that and for them to be paid. So the change that's been made is now on the American side. As of this year, every player and the captain will all receive $500,000, $500,000, which arguably to them is pennies. You got to think about what Scottie Scheffler made per swing this year.
Yeah, exactly.
You think it's incredible. Now, of that money, $300,000 will get donated to charity.
Okay.
And the remaining $200,000, the players themselves can do whatever they want with. It's a stipend. And truthfully, no one would really know what would happen. They can be private.
Absolutely.
They can be quiet about it. They could put it in their pocket. They could use it for the travel expenses if they want to rent a big house. I don't know, whatever it may be. But the concern here is the optics versus the reality. I will say that there are a number of players, and including coming right from the top, Keegan Bradley, who've already put it on record of saying the entire amount that I'm making, all $500,000, is going to charity. I'm not putting a dime of it in my pocket, but they can't deny the payment. They can't say, don't give me the money.
Right.
The best that they can do optics wise is to turn around and give it all to charity.
Mm-hmm.
The other side, again, talking about optics, on the European side, the European team, they declined any payments. Their players will not receive a stipend. There is no payment whatsoever. So they're continuing to frame it as we are playing solely for honor, not a penny is exchanged. So here's where I come back to that reality versus optics. The reality is that the money is so insignificant to them, it really makes no difference. It's not like they're playing for millions and millions of dollars, and they're not like they're extorting the team, like, you got to pay me big money or I'm not going to play. Mm-hmm. There's no one who's turned down a captain's pick or an invitation to play unless they get paid XYZ. Their agents aren't in there trying to haggle for more money. Right. None of that's happening. But at the end of the day, there's the optics. They're getting paid versus the European team. And you get this almost an underdog-y feeling, like the guys who are getting paid versus the guys who are not. So here's what Luke Donald said, and then we'll talk about what he said, and then we'll talk about what it could possibly mean. He said, "We all know how high the ticket prices are, averaging out at around $750 each. So it's going to be an expensive trip out for a family of four. if the U.S. players are getting paid and they're not, and they aren't performing, the New Yorkers could let them know about it. So it's true. Like, we're here, we're in New York. We go to these things. We know that they can be brutal. And again, no one's going to get into the semantics of like, I know you donate to charity or it's only $500,000. People would be like, are going to be chirping at him saying like, you're getting paid for this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're losing matches. So the disaster that it would be for the American team to have that home crowd, which is their advantage, which we're seeing the European team actively training for, even to the point of using VR goggles and immersive experiences to see what it's going to be like. If that vibe switches, and it's almost like that Rocky moment, where like they start to go the other way because here's a team who's getting paid versus unpaid. That's the concern that they've got to worry about.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the crowd is it's going to be full force Americans before New York, before anything else. I think wherever they're from, wherever they're traveling from, the majority of the crowd there are going to be rooting for the American team.
Sure,
right? Because it's a home field, right? So I don't think anyone is going to, like, you go to a Giant game and they got a new quarterback they paid $100 million to, and he throws a couple interceptions. You may scream from the audience, like, fire this bum and all that stuff in the moment. But I think for Ryder Cup, I just think the crowd is going to be behind them the whole time. I hope I'm right, because I can't see this crowd turning on the American team because of that reason. Because of they're getting paid and they're underperforming. I don't know if anyone's going to have their chip on their shoulder. If it was in Europe, this Ryder Cup, I think the Europeans will be all over America.
Of course, they would eat
all
that
over
up.
them, and it would be the leading story, signs, money signs, all that stuff.
They would eat that up.
100%.
I think what Luke Donald is pointing out here is he's saying that it's not going to be an out the gate that the fans are going to be after them for taking any type of money. No.
Right.
What he's saying is that if they're having a lackluster performance, if the American team is getting already a bit embarrassed on home soil, that's where the little bit of the fans may let them hear it of saying, on top of this, you're getting paid or whatever it may be. So you guys weigh in the comments. Let us know. Do you think this will be a non-issue, or do you think it's going to be something that is going to be brought up? And I think, if nothing else, I think that this was a silly decision to pay these guys.
Me too.
Because the effect it has is little to nothing on them at the end of the day. To me, it'd be either pay them what they get paid for everything else, like a significant amount, $5 million for every guy, or don't pay them at all.
Right.
And I'm leaning towards don't pay them at all. But the reason I say this is it's going to cost all those guys far more than it's worth, that extra $200,000 in even facing the press all week. The questions that are going to be asked. They're going to be questions that are going to be asked probably even by, maybe European reporters looking to stir the pot. Like,
yes, totally.
What do you think of like you getting paid versus them getting paid? And even just, if you go back to it, it became an issue in the last one, just even the speculation of getting paid. Remember all the questions that guys like Patrick Cantlay had an answer to, and the fact that he wasn't wearing that, and where Hatgate started, he wasn't wearing a hat. He's saying it's because he couldn't find a hat that fit, which is still silly to me to think about,
right?
With all the resources that they have, versus saying, "Hey, I'm not getting paid. I'm not going to wear the hat." So if payment crept in enough, then that I got to imagine it's going to creep into the conversation, and my concern would be that the PGA of America is almost setting these guys up for extra difficulty that they don't need in an already difficult week by forcing them. Now they're going to have to answer the questions like, what are you doing with the extra $200,000? Right. And I know these guys will try to put it to bed really quick. I think all of them will eventually come out and say the entire thing is getting donated XYZ. Sure. I would think, but on the same token, you just don't know. And I think just even being asked the question can be relentless.
I think if you've made it to a Ryder Cup, odds are pretty good that you're financially well off. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I could see these guys not needing the money and doing exactly what you said. But why not take a page out of like the MLB's playbook? Guys make it to the All-Star game. They get the winning team splits a bonus. It's an $800,000 pot, and it breaks out to like $25,000 to each player if you win. And then there's these stipends, the hotel and the food and all that stuff. Why not incentivize the guys that if you win, you'll get the $500, and then at that point you could donate it all to charity? We go to these events all the time, and there's 50-50s at golf outings, and you win, you give it back, right? Same thing. Like, oh, U.S. one, and then maybe as collectively as a team, that $500,000 per player as a team, the United States team has donated the whatever the pot is, $6 million to this charity of their choosing, and that one makes it look even like a better event.
Sure,
right?
Yeah,
maybe do that.
You guys saw us in the comments. Do you think that there should be some financial payout tied to the winning of the Ryder Cup, or do you think it's best to keep it completely pure? To me, I think that there should be some sporting events that are played for something beyond money, especially in a conversation now where all we seem to talk about is money, and fans are sick of it. Talk about the huge payouts at LIV and what that did, the PGA Tour raising their payouts. And we've heard the responses. We've heard people saying, comments and otherwise saying, like, I'm sick of money talk. I don't want to hear that. I think that there are certain things that I like that they remain pure. Even outside of that's why I like watching amateur events, to be honest with you, the U.S. Amateur and stuff like that. But outside of that, things like the Olympics now.
Yeah.
The amount of the guys who play for pride, for country. And similarly for this, but there's the other side of the coin where if you do look at the financials, and there's been plenty of uproar and plenty of bad press for the Ryder Cup around the price that they set for tickets, as it's go into $750 per person. That is a lot of money that's being brought in, and it's peanuts compared to what they're making off of the broadcast rights and everything like that. So there's a certain people that say, like, well, why should all the corporations and all like these other guys get so rich? And I understand, like, the PGA of America is not necessarily a corporation, and it is really good that they take so much of that money and use to fund what the PGA of America does, which is, you're teaching professionals and things like that. That is fantastic, but there should be like some sort of trade-off, and to me, I almost feel like the trade-off should be fair ticket prices.
Yeah.
Make it very attainable for people to come. And even if you have to do like what the Masters does, where there's a lottery system. So, whatever it may be. But the reality is it's just something that's not matching up there. If the event is making so much money, how do you handle that? Do you handle that by then creating a purse that maybe the winning team takes home, and then they can disperse that however they see fit, whether that be giving it to organizations that grow the game or whatever it may be? There's something that I think over time eventually there's got to be some give and take there. But the reality is, like, if it was my vote, I think that no one should get paid. I think it should be very similar to the Olympics, and you're just playing for country.
That's true. And you do win. If you do win an Olympic medal, you do win money, but it's very peanuts. I think it's like 30-something thousand for a gold.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be. It's not like life-changing.
Right.
The medal itself is more life-changing than the money.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, most of what that was designed for was, as the Olympics was predominantly more of amateur athletes for a long time.
Right.
And just even making money back of the cost it costs a lot of them to get there. A lot of these guys are not pro athletes.
Absolutely.
There are crossover sports, but there are some that are not making millions like these guys are.
Yeah. And to your point before about the European guys not even getting stipends and stuff, is that like they're not even, I mean, obviously they're not digging into their pockets for
everything's
taken care of. We know that.
Everything's taken
care of. But like, they're MLB again, like I keep going after other sports, but they offer these stipends and these, like, you shouldn't have to go out of pocket for a Ryder Cup. We know that, if you get made to do, of course. But money's become such a big deal with sports. And I do agree with you. I would just rather it be $0, zero payment, anything.
Right.
Just play for the glory.
And
because that's the best part.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, it should be either both teams are getting the same amount or nothing, because I think that the PGA of America created an optics problem that they didn't need to have by paying these guys anymore and giving an opportunity for opposing fans, the press and interviewers, an opportunity to put these American players on their heels of just having them have to answer that question. What are you doing with the money? You're getting paid. They're not getting paid. Do you think that there's a difference? Do you think one of you is more motivated than the other because you're not getting paid and they are?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it doesn't come down to the small amount of money. It comes down to, again, the optics are, the distilled thing is, you're getting paid. They're not.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And I think that creates a bigger problem. And Luke Donald pointed out that it could become a bigger problem for them if they're not performing up to what the fans expect to see this week. So you guys let us know your own thoughts down in the comments below. Either way, we're in for a wild ride and one exciting Ryder Cup. We'll be watching it really closely and talking about it here on the podcast. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one.